everyone. Hi, I'm Tasha, and I am the Bay Area chapter leader for the Goretti group. And this is my friend Debbie. Debbie, would you like to introduce yourself?
My name is Debbie Sucich. I am the New York chapter coordinator. We've had the Goretti group here in New York for 8 years now.
Wonderful. Debbie, can you tell me a little bit about your upbringing?
Sure. I grew up in a Catholic family, blue collar. My dad was a cop. My mom was a nurse. She stayed home to raise us after my twin brother was born. I have an older brother also. Um, my parents were very faithful. Mass every Sunday. It took priority no matter where we were. Any family vacations, the first thing we did on Sunday was find a Catholic church. So very happy to have two very faithful parents. In deeds more than words. We didn't speak about the faith a lot, but we knew that that was the most important thing in our life.
Debbie, when you were younger, what were your ideas of what life would be like when you grew up?
Wow. Well, I really never knew what I wanted to be when I grew up. I changed majors 3 times in college, so I really didn't have a clear vision. I know I wanted to follow my heart, but I didn't know where that would lead. So my practical intuitions led me to education because I really wanted to major in something that I could use after college, and also psychology. So that whole interest in human behavior and why people do the things they do interests me a lot. So I think I use that a little bit with the chastity angle with Goretti Group as well. So I'm very happy as a teacher. I started off as an elementary school teacher, and now I'm a high school religion teacher and campus minister at an all-girls high school in Brooklyn, New York. And I'm very happy there.
Wonderful. Were you always a faithful Catholic growing up, or were there times when you strayed away from the faith?
Yes, I was always a church going Catholic. I always tried to learn about my faith the best way I could. I can't say I was always like extremely interested in learning more. School was not my forte. I mean, I did apply myself by the end of high school, but really, I did enjoy going to church. I didn't really, because I went to Catholic school all my life, I was very blessed to go to elementary and high school and college. Of course, as you get into the higher education, you don't get much Catholicism. So I can't say that I was uneducated in my faith, but I can't say that I was really cultivating a lot of my faith other than Sunday Mass for most of my young life. Um, but I think when I finished college and paid off my loans and had a job, that's when I really asked myself, what do you want to do with your life? And I really felt a strong call to give my life to God.
At what point did you begin to consider religious life, and how did you start looking into that?
Well, I guess I was about 22 years old, or 23 maybe. I had finished my first year or first 2 years working. And I really didn't know any sisters. There was one sister left in my parish elementary school, and I sort of emulated her a little bit. She was a Dominican teaching. The Dominicans started our elementary school. Um, so I thought for a second, well, maybe I'd want to be a nun, but I didn't have any confidence at all to be a sister. So I applied to do a year of volunteer work at St. Francis in a soup kitchen in Philadelphia. That actually didn't work out. I actually wound up accepting a job in special education literacy, which is what my master's degree is in. And I think God has been telling me over and over again, you'll see a pattern here, that he kind of wants me in New York City. I don't know why. But basically, I wasn't supposed to go anywhere else, although I did try. So after that experience of working for a few more years, I actually quit my very good public school teaching job, and I entered the Dominicans with that sister as my sponsor. So I guess I was about 26 or 27, and I entered. But after 6 months, I knew it wasn't the right place for me. There were it wasn't a traditional religious life. A lot of things had changed over the years. Not that I knew what traditional, I didn't really know the difference between, a conservative order and a liberal order. All I knew is the sister, that I was familiar with wore the habit and was a teacher and a principal. And I said, that's something I would like to do. But when I was with the community, obviously, a lot of things have changed. And it wasn't a fit for me. So a couple years later, after I came home and worked a little bit more, I entered a monastery it's a Franciscan monastery in New Jersey. And I thought, okay, this is a monastic life, things will be a little more traditional. And again, not really knowing, too much. But it stayed there a year, and I was supposed to become a novice. And I decided that this also was not a fit. I had found out that a few, maybe half of the sisters really were a little bit more, I don't know what you would say, liberal than what I had expected in a monastery. So I said, I can't really commit my life to an order where everyone's kind of not on the same page, one heart and mind type of thing. So I did leave, and I went into a ministry. It's like a missionary group called Lamp Ministries in New York City. So they evangelized the poor. It was Catholic evangelization with the poor. And it was a beautiful organization. So I did do that year of missionary work. And I was so blessed to be able to do pro-life work because after I left the Dominicans, a beautiful lady at the parish gave me a little cassette tape that just changed my life. And I'm dating myself now because nobody uses cassette tapes anymore. But I put it in my car radio and I listened to it, and it's called Contraception, Why Not by Janet Smith. And I'm sure most of you have heard of that. She's like a role model of mine now. She's actually a consecrated virgin also. And that changed me. Like I was on fire for pro-life, like from that point on. So when I was in the Bronx doing missionary work, they let me start some pro-life ministries, and it was really a beautiful time. And then there wasn't a lot of time for discernment. I did visit the Sisters of Life. I love them. Again, didn't have the confidence that I should have had at that time. I didn't really know what the application process was like. But I wound up entering a Carmelite monastery that a friend of mine had taken me to in Buffalo, New York. And I spent a year and 9 months as a Carmelite sister. And it was a beautiful experience. I enjoyed it tremendously. It was a very difficult life, but I loved it. And unfortunately, the chapter has to vote to see if you can make first vows. And they decided that I should go home, even though, like I didn't do anything wrong. It was like a very beautiful goodbye, so, but they just thought the life would be too stressful for me in the long term. And I guess they would meant physically stressful because, I was already an older vocation for them. By this time I was in my mid 30s. And they usually take young women like in their early 20s. So I guess my age got the best of me. And they basically, we left on good terms, but I was sent home. And now, again, going back to teaching, or just, I worked in a homeless shelter for a while. I worked in a parish as a secretary for a while. And then I did go back to teaching. So that was my long road of discernment for religious life. And I had no idea what the vocation of consecrated virginity was. I had never heard of it. I never imagined that was what God was calling me to. And I'm trying to remember who the first person, I think it was a youth minister. I was involved actively with youth ministry since I came home from the Carmelites, and also the Goretti group was started very quickly after I came home from the Carmelites. And she had told me she was a consecrated virgin, and it turns out that she was only the one of the two. Unfortunately, she passed away now, but she was one of the two in Brooklyn. Which is where I became consecrated about 10 years later after I came home. So,
Wow. So, can you tell us a little bit about what it means to be a consecrated virgin? And you can start at any point. Maybe you want to even talk about how this is an old rite of the church, but some people might not be familiar with what is the difference between being a consecrated virgin, being just a virgin and not consecrated, and being a sister in an order or a lay person.
Yeah, that's a great question. So there are so many forms of consecration, right? Our baptisms are our first consecration. Our confirmation is another consecration, right, in the Holy Spirit. Um, I would say consecrated virginity. Um, it's it's something that canonically is a public witness in the church. So um, it's an ancient rite of the church. It existed before religious orders. So when, for example, Saint Clare. Now I don't know if she was a consecrated virgin, but let's just say Saint Clare wanted to follow Saint Francis, right? And so there were no other women in the Poor Clares yet, right? So Saint Clare went to Francis, and whether or not they use this ancient rite, I think it has to be a bishop anyway who canonically has to consecrate you into the order of virgins. They call it the order of virgins, but it's not a religious order. So you belong to the order of virgins, but you live by yourself, unless of course you can find other consecrated virgins to live with. But it's not a religious order. There's no community life. There's no vows, because you can't vow obedience or poverty, because you have to be self-sustaining financially. So if anyone is not financially stable, you cannot become a consecrated virgin. Unfortunately, because there are no vows, you don't have any community to help take care of you. So it's a beautiful, beautiful, independent sort of life, but you're giving yourself completely over to Christ. It's a mystical marriage. The rite of consecration, you can Google that and find the actual wording of the ceremony. There's a litany of saints, prostration. It's almost like an ordination ceremony. So if you've seen an ordination, that's almost like what it looks like. And it's so beautiful. Usually you're in a bridal dress. I had a beautiful, simple white gown and a veil. I did choose a wedding veil. You don't have to. There are different flexibilities in the rite of consecration. Some women like to sing. Thank goodness I didn't have to sing, because I'm not a singer. But it's something where, again, you're mystically married to Christ. You are forever, pledged to Christ. And it's not something like a religious order where you can decide, well, I kind of want to leave, or, get a dispensation like priest. Like once you're ordained a priest, you're ordained forever, right? So yes, you can get a dispensation and leave the priesthood, but your priesthood never leaves. It's the same thing with consecration. So when you're consecrated by the bishop and you're in the order of virgins, you do have to be a virgin physically, unless there's some sort of abuse in your past, that if that was, the reason that you don't have the physical virginity. It's a spiritual virginity. It's a spiritual motherhood. And the charism is really a Marian charism. So Mary is our model, because the title, yes, exactly. The title is Consecrated Virginity Lived in the World. So, I never even knew this existed, because you usually don't know who is a consecrated virgin, because you're not allowed to wear a habit. You're not allowed to, well, some dioceses actually, you can wear a habit. But there's no real distinction. There's no like letters after your name when you sign a letter. There's nothing like that to distinguish you as a consecrated virgin. It's really a spiritual relationship with the diocese, with the bishop who consecrated you. And it's just a giving over of your life to the people of God, and even your families, if you have family obligations. This is a vocation where you can keep your family obligations, and you know, it's being 11 in the world. So.
So one thing I was wondering about is if someone decided to change their mind after they were consecrated, is that an option? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, they're very wise in the general kind of guidelines that they give to women discerning. So usually they do expect women to be of a certain maturity and age. I was 44 when I was consecrated. And I was discerning for 20 years. So they pretty much knew that I was educated in the faith and that I was, fully discerned into the vocation. Um, so you can't really change your mind and get like a dispensation. Like, I don't think that exists, but you can choose to join a religious order if there is something like an opportunity where you can join a religious order and you feel that that's your calling. You can, that vocation is still open to you, but marriage is not. Yeah.
Can men become consecrated virgins?
They have something called a hermit, I think, a diocesan hermit, or I don't know if it's a consecrated hermit, but no. This is a special vocation for women. And again, Marian with her purity of heart and soul and body. I think there have been people who looked into it, but I think it's just the hermit life that men can do alone in the world with the approval of their bishop. So it's a different type of calling. And the difference between a consecrated virgin and a religious sister, like I said before, we don't have a community life, but we also don't have the vows. So religious sisters used to have the 3 vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. And like the Sisters of Life have a 4th vow for the sanctity of human life. But they don't usually receive the rite of consecration. I think in the past, maybe before Vatican II, they the cloistered sisters may have received the rite of consecration. From what I'm understanding, I could have that wrong, but some of the sisters did receive the rite of consecration, and I was told that was the sisters who were completely cloistered. And then I think it went out of disuse after Vatican II, but then the popes in actually, I believe it was pretty soon after Vatican II that they reinstated the vocation. And the popes felt that this is something that more women would be called to in the modern world. And it really is growing now. There's a lot of younger women now who are discerning this vocation. And like you're saying, very happy that there's another option for women in the church.
Do you wear any kind of ring, or did you have any kind of pendant to symbolize this commitment you're making?
Yes, I wear a crucifix ring, but that's my choice. That wasn't something, but it was blessed and it was put on by the bishop at the ceremony. So I do wear a crucifix ring. I wear my miraculous medal, my St. Therese medal also, and a cross. And it's touched to many relics of Maria Goretti and St. Faustina and, all the saints that I can get to. But yes, there's nothing required, but many consecrated virgins choose to wear a ring on their ring finger.
If someone wanted to explore this, what would you recommend their first step to be?
I would definitely say check out online. There's so many YouTube videos of consecrated virgins, recent ones and ones from the past. There's a whole information guide and conference that you can go to. Anybody can go to that. There are now books being published by the United States Association of Consecrated Virgins. There's a few blogs that are really like Sponsor Christi and things like that. There are many blogs that you can go to, or a few blogs, I should say, with Consecrated Virginity that explain a lot more than I ever could. And so, yeah, just talk to people, be in spiritual direction. Usually if you're younger, a lot of times women will make like yearly vows or yearly promises of consecration. A lot of women don't want the public ceremony. So a lot of women choose to be privately consecrated. And you can be privately consecrated and live a life of consecrated virginity in a way that's not canonical. You can still even have a public mass with family and friends, and you can formalize your consecration. But usually with a spiritual director, it would be a yearly consecration, and then you would build up to that full perpetual consecration.
Is there any kind of biblical reference for this, as well as potentially like after we pass away and, Lord willing, we are in heaven? Is there any special position that consecrated virgins have? And I guess going back to the biblical ties, I feel like there are mentions of consecrated virgins like in heaven. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. The virgins, obviously, the Bible story with the 10 virgins and they're having their lamps lit is big. But in the Office of Readings, for those who pray the Liturgy of the Hours, there's a whole section for virgins. Okay, so there is definitely a specialness to it. And again, it doesn't have to be a formal rite of consecration. Obviously, there are many people who live out their baptismal consecration in this way. And so we're very blessed in our church. Like the sacrament of marriage is held up to a very high esteem. Virginity is held up to a very high esteem. But it's that sacramentality of it all that if you're not doing it for the right reasons, if you're not a virgin for the sake of the kingdom, that's the key words in all the writings on the virgins. It has to be for the sake of the kingdom of God. If you're doing it for any other reason, then it's not a pure spiritual offering. You have to be very careful of your motives.
It's so interesting because I had a ring made with a scripture verse on it several years ago in Israel when I was actually a Protestant and I was praying about what verse to have on this ring. And I kept coming back to 1 Corinthians 7:34, which is where Paul talks about there's a difference between a married woman and a virgin. And an unmarried woman or a virgin focuses on how to please the Lord in her body, in her mind, in her soul. A married woman focuses on things of the world, how she can please her husband. And that verse is read in the readings, but a lot of people kind of shy away from it because they think, what does this mean? A married woman pleasing her husband, an unmarried woman or an unmarried person doing more things for the Lord. But it is interesting because at that time, I don't think I knew what a consecrated virgin was. And I felt like this ring was a good verse to get on the ring because I was also discerning, is singleness going to be my vocation? Is marriage going to be my vocation? But there are a lot of biblical ties to the importance of virginity and celibacy and what you can do as a single person. I also feel like this is an important message for today's youth because a lot of us are very confused about our sexuality, our gender identity, and the roles that we play. And it's good for people to know that you can kind of set all of that aside and focus on the Lord. It doesn't necessarily matter, your sexuality is not the forefront of your life. It's your love of God and your love to serve God. If someone did want to become a consecrated virgin, just for clarity, that doesn't mean that they are asexual or that they do not have sexuality. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Definitely. I love teaching my students about relationships, and we have a whole class on it for senior religion. And one of the statements is Jesus a sexual being? And he is. He's fully man. He's but he channeled all of his energies into building the kingdom of God, and that's what we're all called to. We're all called to use our sexuality to be fully alive, to be fully human. Saint Irenaeus said, "The glory of God is man fully alive, and woman fully alive." So we don't check our sexuality at the door. But at the same time, it's not the most important. Our attractions are not the most important part of our life, right? So we are a beloved child of God first, and our sexuality sometimes is very wounded, but that doesn't mean that we're any less beloved of God. And so we have to, the more we love God, the more we learn about God, the more healing and the more wholeness that comes into our life. And so that we can spread that good news and help to heal others as well. But yeah, it really puts everything in perspective when you look at Jesus as fully divine and fully human. And how did he live that out? And that's exactly what we're all called to do.
Well, thank you so much for taking your time to answer these questions. And this is with the Goretti Group. If you are in the Bay Area or the New York area, San Diego, please join your local Goretti Group chapter. And if you are interested in starting your own chapter, please contact us. We would love to talk more about this. And we have some more information about how you can proceed and understanding what a Goretti Group is, what Goretti spirituality is. Thank you so much, Debbie. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Tasha. God bless you.